Freakier Friday ends up being one of the better of the refresh, reboot, sequel, throwback movies. We've seen a lot of revitalized sequels, what'll be like with Beetlejuice. Obviously, we've had Wednesday for the Addams Family. We've also had a whole bunch of movies and TV shows, iCarly, Wizards of Waverly Place, um, yada yada yada. And I think that this movie does something that other movies tend not to do when they do these types of movies. I was pleasantly surprised by this movie. I went in with kind of low expectations. You know, these types of movies don't typically do well because they're not usually really that well put together. And honestly, I was starting to feel that way in the first half. Not even first half, I would say first act, really. And then I got it. And I think the reason why is because, first of all, it took some time to take everything and establish what's happening, what's going on. So there's a lot of setup in the beginning, and it takes a little bit to get to the freakier part. And then once that kind of kicks in, we spend a little bit of time doing some of the things that we're familiar with from Freaky Friday. And then as we kind of divert, we see kind of a more in-depth image of all of the characters. And I think at first it's kind of hard to figure out who is who and keep track of who is who. But then it gets really easy really quickly. And I think they did a really good job of separating and reminding you who is who throughout the movie. So Freaky Friday 1 was a phenomenal hit, of course. Well, that's with Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan. Not the first Freaky Friday, because there was another cast that did the first Freaky Friday. But Freaky Friday with Lindsay Lohan was the first remake of Freaky Friday. And then Freakier Friday is now the reboot, not even reboot, I guess continuation or refresh of the series. I really want to go into spoilers, but what I will say for the people who are interested in this movie and don't know if you're going to go see it, I highly recommend seeing it, whether it's waiting for Disney Plus or going to the theaters. This movie will likely perform better on Disney Plus than in theaters, probably because not a lot of people are going to go see it in theaters. There's just a lot of movies going on right now. And I would say if it's okay to wait. You can wait. It's not something that immediately needs to be seen. But when it goes to Disney Plus and when it goes to streaming and everything like that, highly, highly recommend it. Because it's not a bad film at all. I just understand some people have bigger priorities. Like there's been Superman, there's been Jurassic World, there's been a whole bunch of movies from this year. I think you can save the $15, $20 that it would normally cost and see it in streaming. I went to the theaters because I just really wanted to see the film and I didn't want to wait. And I really enjoyed it. What I will go into when we get into spoilers is I will get into my thoughts of the structure of the movie and overall the elements that I think they did well. So, this is your warning. If you don't want any spoilers, I mean, this movie really doesn't get ruined if you do have spoilers, but I just recommend do what you do. There are going to be spoilers. I will not hold back on what I say. Here we go. This movie does what other movies fail to do, and that is establish its own story. Usually what sequels tend to do, especially reboot sequels or throwback sequels, is they tend to basically do the same story that we've already seen and just copy it again with different characters. This movie decides we're gonna still acknowledge that Freaky Friday exists and has happened, but we're actually going to change some things about it. There are elements that are familiar, and there are elements that are unique to this movie. And I think this movie does a really good balance of giving you nostalgia and also having its own identity as a movie. First of all, the tone of this movie is very different from the original Freaky Friday. What I would say is that it takes itself a little bit more serious. Where I would classify Freaky Friday as a clear comedy, Freakier Friday is more of a drama. And even more so, I would say that for the most part, the comedy bits didn't really land too well, at least for me. Some bits did, some bits didn't. It was kind of iffy, but the overall story was so good. And I think I feel like this movie would have almost benefited from getting rid of some of the comedy parts. But I understand they needed to kind of give you that nostalgia feel. I do think that for the most part that landed. There's some familiar faces that do return in this movie. We got the NCIS guy, Mark Hamill, who is obviously with Tess and everything. We also got Chad Michael Murray, who comes back as Jake. We got a whole bunch of other people. We have Pink Slip coming back for the final song of the movie, which is great. Great welcome surprise. And, I mean, it's not really a surprise. We already kind of knew that they were coming back, but they do perform the original song from the Freaky Friday movie. I think I cried a couple of times. Well, okay, there's a particular moment, specifically in the back half, where I started to cry, and then it just kind of built up as, like, more stuff, like, unfolded. So I would say the first parts of the movie is, for the most part, comedy. It's, for the most part, fun. It gets the fun out of the way. The bits that you all probably like from the original Freaky Friday movie are in there. And some of it's twisted. Some of it's a little bit different from what it was. It's a little bit of the same. But for the most part, I think it rides that line of we're having unique characters that you will like, you will come to like, and the characters that don't feel like the same versions of the characters that we've seen in the past. Like, a lot of times I feel like when it comes to like reboots, sometimes they try to replicate the characters that were in the first movie and try to recreate them as new characters, and it feels like very repetitive. It feels very redundant, I would say. But in this movie, it feels like all of the characters have their unique aspects. I think for a movie like this, it's very important you establish the uniqueness of these characters, because when they do the switch, it makes it a lot easier to track who is who. And I think they really nailed it by establishing the different groups. Because there were moments where I got a little bit confused because of all the people that were switching. But essentially, the older people, Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay, switch with the younger people, the new kids on the block. So I think that by doing that, it, number one, established, okay, the old people are now young and the young people are now old. If they had done something where it's like Lindsay switched to one of them and then Jamie switched to Lindsay, that would have been way too confusing, and that would have been a little bit harder to track. But I think this movie really establishes and really helps you understand who everyone is and what is different about them, and all of their different struggles and quirks, because they all have different issues kind of in this movie. Anna's getting married, so Lindsay Lohan's character is getting married. Jamie Lee Curtis's character, I forget what her Tess is writing a book, or like doing like marketing stuff for a book. And then Harper Is it Harper? Yeah. Harper is the new daughter that Lindsay has. And I forget the other name. Sorry, I forgot the other name. Let me just check real quick. I should have looked this up. It's not Ella. Ella's the pop star, upcoming pop star. Of course, Lily. That's her name. So Lily is this the daughter of the guy that Anna is going to marry. British, and she is from London. Her mom just died, and she's kind of readjusting to the American culture. And through this marriage, she would have to choose whether or not to go back to London or to stay in LA. That's kind of the conflict of the movie, and it deals with the idea of like moving on, moving out, different aspects of emotional trauma and grief, and overall, there's pretty serious elements in this movie that is different from the first movie. Some elements are the same, like the girls are trying to sabotage Anna's wedding because they don't really agree with the combination of their parents together, because they have very different goals and ideas of what will be ideal. So they actively try to sabotage Anna's wedding. And then Tess is kind of just there, but she does have a lot of like therapy aspects to her. She does have important roles. Don't get me wrong, but she's more of like she's kind of been established already, right, from the first film. But what's interesting is that Lily switches with Tess, so that adds something for Jamie Lee Curtis to really do in this film, because Lily's the one who does not want to go, who does not want to stay in LA, in California. I think it's really interesting, the dynamics that they did. Overall, I would give this movie like a 7.5 out of 10. Mainly because, for me, the bits that actually missed were the more comedic parts. Because I don't think all of the jokes landed that well. At least not to me. Maybe it was just the atmosphere of the theater, but some of them were like, okay. I know this is like not necessarily for me. But what I will say, a joke that well, it's not really a joke, but it's a continuation of the story from Freaky Friday. Because if you remember, in Freaky Friday, Jake ends up really liking Tess and not Anna. But it is Anna, but he thinks it's Tess. So they kind of add to this in this story. And I think that really helps land the plane. Like, they didn't have to do it that way, but it really helps land the plane, especially in the end of the movie, because Chad's character brings a +1 to the wedding, and it's basically looks exactly like Tess's old look from the original movie, which is kind of funny because it shows you that he's got a type. Man's got a type. And they definitely play up the bit that Jake likes Tess, not Anna, in this movie as well. And I think that it helps that Tess is now like a young person now, right? She's now being swapped by a young person, so it helps add to that like cool factor, and really sell every time that he meets her is not actually like Tess, but it plays up really, really well. Mark Hamill doesn't really have a lot to do. He just appears a couple of times, just to establish that he is there. There is also an accidental Easter egg in the movie, because October 3rd is the wedding, and it apparently is a complete accident. Lindsay noticed it right away and talked to the director about it because it's Mean Girls Day. And they were like, it's too late to change it. So now it's October 3rd, which means that October 3rd is now no longer just Mean Girls Day, but it's also Freaky Friday Day. Which also means that it's just Lindsay Lohan Day. Which I think is honestly pretty cool. Even though it was by accident. And I really liked that it was this idea, the whole story was the idea of Anna hasn't been able to do what she really wants to do because of the fact that she has a kid and she chose to be a single mom. I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it's actually established, but I think Harper is adopted. That's my impression of it. I don't know if she's supposed to be related. I'm not sure. I don't remember if it was addressed in the movie or if I missed it. But I don't remember if Harper is related, right? But either way, Anna chose to have her. And I think that the idea of now you need to raise this kid and sometimes you have to give up your dreams a little bit. You know, you can't be the punk rock person or the musician that you used to be. I think that's really interesting, and I like how they also resolve that issue by having Anna perform at the end and kind of getting her back to performing with Pink Slip. And I also think I think overall I enjoyed the movie. I would watch it again. I think there's probably bits that I missed. There is an even amount of comedy and seriousness, and I do think that overall it's a pretty good film. I think it's pretty close to being the best, like, this type of sequel that we're gonna get. And I think the reason why is because it really does establish its own identity outside of the original film. It doesn't just try to recreate the first film. It takes the first film, uses some elements, and then switches some of it up. And I think that's a really good choice to do, because otherwise it would feel like watching the same movie, but you know how it is. Like sometimes these reboot sequel things are sometimes just like not that great because they don't add a lot of substance to the actual franchise. But in this case, I definitely think this one added it, and I could see a potential for a third movie. I think if they were to do a third movie, it would have to be gender swapped as well. And I think you would do it to where maybe like Lindsay and Jamie switch with the guys, I don't know, like Mark Hamill and the new husband or something like that. I don't know, maybe not that. I don't think that would necessarily work, but I do think if you were gonna make it more interesting, I think it would be male to female switch. But other than that, I like it. It's pretty good. I know that there is talks of potentially having a Parents Trap 2. Yeah, Parents Trap 2. I would be down to see what they would do with that. And I think if they did, it would be nice if they referenced October 3rd in that movie as well. So that it's just more of a Lindsay Lohan day. Anyways, that's my review. I don't think I have too much more to say. Feel free to comment down below your thoughts, how did you like the movie? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bad? Let me know down in the comments. And I'll see you next time. Bye!